If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Pedro Rico. Just thought I would throw a little something different in tonight, being that it's Masters Week. Anyways, guys, we've got a great show for you tonight. We've got another great episode of Coach's Corner. We're going to be starting here in just a minute, and I'll bring out my guest panel for this week in just a moment here. But first, as I said, it's Masters Week. I know many of you are coming home from work and eager to catch up on today's play. But nevertheless, let me remind everyone that the broadcast tonight is live on blogtalkradio.com, and it's from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for you East Coasters. Joining me a little bit later is actually one of the Coach's Corner panel guests tonight, Mr. Greg Liberto, the head coach, and we'll talk with him in a little while. But he's going to be joining in on the Coach's Corner panel first off. Let me just introduce the panel for this week on Golf Talk Live, and it's, of course, returning champion, Mr. Clint Wright, PGA teaching pro, and a 30-year veteran of the PGA at R3 Golf Academy out in Pendleton, South Carolina. And if you want to know a little bit more about Clint, you can check out his website at www.tgmgolf.com. As I mentioned, my guest a little bit later on, of course, is Mr. Greg Liberto, and he's an experienced speaker, coach, and writer, has a perspective on the game unlike anybody else. With over 15 years of research, Greg has developed programs to show how to become your best. That's why they call him the head coach. And you can check out Greg after the show on his website at www.theheadcoach.us. And last but certainly not least, rounding out the panel, of course, joining us here for the first time is Mr. Mike Lawrence. Also a PGA professional, life member of the PGA, and designer of Solid Contact Golf, the R3 approach, anatomy of playing and improving at the game of golf. Gentlemen, and also before I bring them on, Mike's website, if you want to learn more a little bit Mike Lawrence, that's www.mikelawrencegolf.com. Gentlemen, welcome to Coach's Corner.
Hey, good to be here.
All right, guys, thanks for taking time out. I know it's Masters Week, and everybody wants to find out what's happening on there, but I appreciate you guys taking the time and joining in the program tonight. Of course, Clint has been on the program before, so he's a little more familiar with the format, but each Thursday night, of course, on the Coach's Corner segment that we've started back in March, this is an opportunity for you guys listening out there to email some questions to the program and pick the brains of some of the best coaches and teaching pros in the business. Every week I'll have a different panel, and of course we're going to cover a new topic each week. Plus, we're going to help some of you weekend warriors out there. So if you want to call in during the live broadcast, you can certainly do so at area code 646-716-4667, or you can email me some questions at questions.golftalklive@gmail.com. And just before we get going here, guys, let also remind everybody, if you want to follow the show on social media, you can do so on Facebook at Golf Talk Live Blog. That's facebook.com/Golf Talk Live blog, or you can follow me on Twitter at Ted and Buck CEO. That's CEO in caps. And don't forget to check out the Golf Talk Live blog, or website at www.golftalkliveblog.com. Okay, guys, let's jump right in. The question was sent in from Louisville, Kentucky, and the young lady's name is Stacy, and she wanted to find out a little bit about pre-shot routine. And she said, I wanted to ask the panel about pre-shot routines. Why is this important to have one? Clint, of course, I'm going to throw you under the bus first. I want you to start the show off. Why is it important that Stacy has a pre-shot routine?
You know, Ted, I appreciate you throwing me on the bus. I could just throw the other guys under the bus and just pass, right? But, well, you know, I think that it's, in my view, I guess, has been play and watch people play. I mean, the pre-shot routine is important because obviously you have to make some decisions. You got to decide what you're going to do. That's part of all the routine. And it's something that's obvious that you have to do, but there's no real set way of doing it. I think that's the part of the individuality of the game and getting ready to hit the shot you think you ought to hit. And so for Stacy, I think it's something I know that Mike and Greg elaborate on this, but it's almost like you have to experiment a little bit to find out how you can do it and how it works best for you, to get ready to get up over your shot, to have confidence and trust that you're going to be able to hit a good golf shot at that particular point. But it's just something that you've got to do in order to pick the right club, where you're going to line up. It's all part of that. And also, you know, in my opinion, it's all about how you get ready to play the round, too. The pre-shot or the pre-game routine starts, you know, on the practice tee. To get ready to play, get your mindset and what you want to do, you know, calm yourself down and get ready to make a good golf swing. So I think from Stacy's standpoint, it's obvious it's important, and I think maybe today and throughout the conversations we can give her some advice on maybe how to start finding her pre-shot routine.
That's an excellent way to put it, and very well said, Clint. Thank you. Greg, do you want to chime in here as well and expand on that?
Sure. Yeah, no, and Clint, I absolutely agree. So much of this is about, you know, being prepared prior to actually coming to the course and you know, not just getting ready to hit your shot. And a lot of the core of what I teach is called 100% ready. And 100% ready is twofold. It's a mindset that you bring to the course when you're practicing or when you're playing in your most competitive event ever, but it's also the process and the mindset that you have standing over the golf ball. And basically what it entails is, you know, doing exactly what you talked about, Clint, getting you to the point where you are confident and you are calm and you have consistency in terms of how you approach a shot. And for me, the first part of being 100% ready is to create emotional balance. And, you know, I have an entire coaching program that shows you how to eliminate your ants or your automatic negative thoughts. If you think about negative thoughts or negative emotions as just negative energy. So if you're thinking about a 3-putt from the previous hole, if you're thinking about, you know, an email that somebody sent you earlier in the day that's still irritating you as you're standing on the first tee, well, then you do not have emotional balance. Emotional balance is being calm and confident. And then number 2 is you have to pick a very specific target where you're actually going to land the ball on, visualize the entire flight path of the ball from start to finish, and then have all of your energy committed to your target. So there's no thoughts about what you did in this hole last time. There's no thoughts about score. There's no thoughts about the bunker on the left. There's no thoughts about the water or the out of bounds on the right. And there's no negative swing thoughts or over-detailed swing thoughts. It's about all of your energy being committed to that dime spot target very specifically. And when you start to hit every shot in practice that way and every shot during competition that way, all of a sudden you have consistency not only in your pre-shot routine, but you have consistency in the way that you come to the golf course as well.
Very well said. And Mike, before I let you chime in here, I just want to sort of add to that a little bit. You know, you raise a valid point, Greg. Really the point, in my estimation, of the pre-shot routine gives you two opportunities, not only to set up and prepare for what's about to happen, but to give you an opportunity to clear your head from what's happened in the past. And as you said, whether it be something that's happened during the day, during business or what have you, or even maybe some bad shots that happened a few holes ago, the pre-shot routine, in my mind, allows you to sort of regroup and get ready for that next shot and sort of clear your mind and then get ready for the job that's at hand, because each shot is unique and different, and you obviously want to be able to prepare for that. So having a pre-shot rune and having some sort of consistency in getting ready to hit those shots is extremely important, and that's why the top players in the world have a pre-shot routine. Mike, do you want to add some thoughts into that as well?
Sure. This is all really, really great stuff. I'm always looking to learn. That's what we do as golfers, right? But
right.
Yeah, to address Stacy's question, maybe more specifically, would be, I think that she's referring to that pre-shot routine that we would go to once we're actually at the ball, ready to prepare to hit that shot. And it's what came to mind first for me. It was when Tom Watson was playing so well, almost won the British Open here a couple of years ago, and they at one point showed Tom going through his pre-shot routine. I'm talking about, the 8 to 18 second period of time just before he goes ahead and makes his swing. But they showed his pre-shot routine as it is now, and they compared it to his pre-shot routine from one of the previous British Opens that he'd won, a couple of decades ago. And, it was
right.
amazing. It was virtually, they had a split screen going, so they had today's Tom's pre-shot routine going today right up beside his pre-shot routine from whatever year that was. I don't know what year exactly it was, but, 15 whatever number of years ago. And you know what? They were exactly the same. He had the same number of waggles. He had the same number of looks. He had the same number of steps and regrips. And, the two routines were virtually identical. That was pretty amazing to me. So I think that pre-shot routine that Stacy might be looking to get information about would be, what happens when we actually get to that ball. On the PGA Tour, actually, there's a 40 or 50 second period of time that a player has to actually get their shot off. When that clock actually starts is a little bit of a gray area to me, but there's a clock, so there are times when groups get put on the clock. I remember last year, actually, in the Masters last year, the young fellow from China, sorry, can't remember his name, but he was penalized a couple of shots for slow play.
Right.
And, so it really does bring in a lot of different, aspects of what that pre-shot routine is going to involve. But essentially, when we get to that ball, you're absolutely right that, it gives us a chance to settle down. It is a time in the R3 approach. One of the tenets of the approach is has to do with what we call the fifth law, the law of subtraction. And this points directly to what you're talking about, Greg. The law of subtraction simply has to do with the fact that whatever we're doing during a round of golf, there's going to be a very important need to subtract things back down, whether they're emotional, aspects of what we're experiencing, or the mental thoughts, or, virtually everything we're doing, we have to begin to subtract back down so that we can go ahead and get the focus that you're talking about. And that's what happens in the pre-shot routine. At some point during that pre-shot routine, it's like a countdown, like NASA, counting down that space shuttle. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, pull the trigger. And during that process, we're doing that. We've made a decision about what club to hit, what the shot is calling for us to do with that club. So those decisions, those mental decisions, have been made. So once we're up there at the ball, we begin to go through our actual preparation and commitment to hit that shot. And during that time, we talk about this in the R3 approach. During that time, we will do certain things, just like I was talking about as far as Tom in his pre-shot routine. We'll have a certain number of waggles. We'll have a certain number of re-steps, all this becomes part of having that good, effective pre-shot routine, which involves the subtraction process, getting us ready to make that swing.
Right. Excellent points, gentlemen, all three. I just think that not enough is made of pre-shot routines. A lot of obviously most of the instructors out there know that it's an individual thing to each player, but I think it's an important component in teaching and helping the students to understand how important and how valuable that 18 or 15, 18 seconds is before they hit each shot, because it really does, as you've all very eloquently pointed out, gives the player, whether it's a top-level player or an amateur, the opportunity to really sort of refocus, regroup, and prepare themselves for the next task at hand. And I think too many people don't have a pre-shot routine, especially obviously at the amateur level. The pros, I think, have got it down packed, but there's sometimes even they can get sort of knocked off their feet, and usually what follows is a bad round when they're not staying focused the way they need to be. They get out of their routine, and all kinds of things happen, and those negative thoughts, as Greg pointed out, sort of creep in and take over. But certainly at the amateur level, I think a lot of people out there, I think that's why there's such inconsistency at the amateur level. Is it's not just a matter of a physical skill, it's the mental side as well, that they don't understand and don't have the skill level to really put it forth. But guys, great comments, and I know that Stacy, in Louisville is going to get some great information from you guys tonight. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more as the evening goes on. But let's move on to our next question. I think, unless anybody else has anything else they want to add, I think we've pretty much answered that.
Yeah, pretty much. But I would add one thing to one of the reasons that people may not see it as being as important as they should is that they never, years ago I can remember, maybe y'all are old enough to remember, about how George Archer would hitch his pants up the same way each time. You got to see that on they don't ever show that on television anymore. The only time you see a player going through any kind of routine is on the putting green. And so the players don't get a sense that it's important. They don't see the best players in the world doing it. They do it, but they just never do show it on television. So I think
right. Actually, the last person that I can honestly think off the top of my head that they ever really showed, and even they don't show that anymore, was Freddie Couples. Freddie would always sort of put that arm up and pull back on the sleeve a little bit.
Right.
And that was part of his routine, and it was every shot. But you're right, they don't show that, and obviously they're under time restraints, and but it would be good to show more of that type of thing, to let the viewing audience then get a better perspective of what these players are going through each shot, and not just sort of jumping from green to green and that's so forth. But guys, let me move on to the next question here so we keep it going. This one's from Richard up in Atlanta, Georgia, not too far away from Augusta there. And he says, he's written in, he says, good evening, gentlemen. He says, being that this is the eve of the Masters tournament, I thought this would be an appropriate question. What is the trick to handling fast greens like Augusta's? And Greg, we're going to let you start off on that. In your experience, what do you find is I don't really think there's a trick, but let's see how we can help Richard here in Atlanta.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. And, so much of putting challenges are, it goes back to the Stacy's question of the whole pre-shot routine. You have to be calm and confident, number one, because obviously if you're playing in the Masters, you have a lot of energy, and sometimes that energy might not be working for you, might be working against you. So you have to go through the same process. And one of the things that I teach my students with putting, and I think this applies to really any speed of green, but I always have them pick a very specific blade of grass where they think the ball is going to enter the hole. So I have them actually stand over the cup and look back at their ball, visualize the line of how their ball is going to get to the hole, and then look at that very specific blade of grass where the ball will enter. And the ball doesn't always enter the bottom of the cup or the middle of the cup. It can come in from either side or either angle. So once you get very, very specific with that spot, what it does now, and then you go back to your ball and you look at your line again from both sides, you feel confident in how it's going to get there. Again, it goes back to when you're standing over the ball and you have all of your energy committed to your target. Now it's just a blade of grass. So what you've done is you've taken any of that physical tension away from your shoulders or your hands or where you might normally feel it, and now you're more relaxed. And if you're more relaxed, you're going to have a smoother stroke. If you have a smoother stroke, you're going to have more control over it. And if you're playing on a course like Augusta with lightning-fast greens, you have to have a smooth, controllable stroke. You have to.
Excellent. Very well.
You know what I mean? You have to get to know the speed and practice, obviously, because it's, those are very, very challenging greens. But the bottom line is you have to be relaxed. You have to have a reliable stroke that you can trust on. All of your energy committed to that blade of grass.
Well said. And Mike, do you want to add to that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all about preparation, right? I mean, if we have the opportunity to experience fast greens and actually do some practicing on fast greens, then we understand how fast greens work. If it's a case where all of a sudden we're on a golf course that has very fast greens when we don't have any history with those types of surfaces, then it can be, it's tough then. It's tough because you just don't have any intuitive, feel for what's happening. And golf, after all, it's completely a game of feel and intuition and a sense for what that shot or that putt is calling for us to do with that golf club. So, practice is everything. So it tracks back to how well we're preparing for those kinds of situations where if we're going to if we have an opportunity to play golf, if it's a tournament, and we know that the greens on that course are going to be fast, well, we need to try to find some good, firm, quick greens to get some experience on. And I know from personal, I played Augusta a couple times back in the day when I was at Clemson, and it's just amazing to me the subtleties in those greens. Now, today they've been rebuilt, so I'm sure they're even more tricky. But I had a caddy there that could read those greens, and I was hitting putts based on my caddy's read that I just couldn't believe I was putting the ball where I was, and he had it down pat. So just understanding the subtleties of a green in terms of hugely important. And as far as developing that ability to determine the speed, I know Clint's got some very good thoughts and insights about how we can practice to help improve our ability to generate the right pace.
Perfect. Well said. And Clint, of course, last but not least on this question.
Well, yeah. I appreciate Mike's confidence because all I do these days is teach putting and short game. But, I'm going to pull one out of Mike's bag here. It's all about subtractions, fellas. I mean, I hate to say it, but the easiest way to deal with fast greens is keep it below the hole.
Yeah.
You can do all you want to, fellas, but you got, keep the damn thing below the hole. That's what you got to do.
Yeah.
But and we joke about that, and we it's kind of humorous. But on the other hand, staying below the hole is exactly what Greg and Mike were both saying. You got to be prepared. So I'm playing my second shot and third shots with the idea of where am I going to have the easiest putt from.
Yeah.
If I'm in between clubs.
That's so true at Augusta, right? I mean,
that's right.
Hit the spots. Yeah, they hit the spots on the greens.
If I'm in between clubs and the long one's going to go uphill, I'm going to play the short one, not because I can't get it to the hole, because I want to putt from below the hole. I don't want to be, it's that whole thing. I don't want to be short-sighted and I don't want to be above the hole. So I'm going to make a lot of decisions in my pre-shot routine, as we were talking earlier, about how and what shot can I play here to get that ball in a good uphill approach to that hole. And obviously, the faster the greens, the more important that becomes, because you can hit it anywhere on the greens when the greens are slow. So it all falls into that pre-shot routine of managing the way you're playing the greens to try to give yourself the best chance.
Yep. And let me just add, guys, let me just chime in here and give a couple of thoughts as well. Something that I've noticed a lot, and not just in teaching myself, but just watching people, at golf courses when they're getting ready to go out and play in their round. And there's two things that really I see. Number one, most people don't allow themselves enough time before a round to get out there and really practice a little bit. And I certainly don't want people to reinvent the wheel just before they're going to go out and play golf. But you need to get out and get on the practice green and make some putts. And some people will do that, but more often than not, what they will do is instead of, sort of trying to determine the speed of the greens that particular day, they'll hit a few short putts and maybe a couple of long putts, but they're more worried about direction than they are speed. And direction, don't get me wrong, is certainly important, but if you don't have a feel for the speed, then you're going to leave your putts, either short, and then, ultimately what ends up happening is after you've left a few short ones, you really sort of get down on it, and the next thing you know, you're 15 feet past. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of inconsistency, and I think people need to allow themselves a little bit more time when they're getting ready to go out and play golf. Get there a few minutes earlier than if you can, and work on getting that feel and the speed of and understanding the speed of the greens that you're going to be playing that day, and not worrying so much about the direction. Right. In my opinion, and I think that's what a lot of people end up doing is they just get there and hit a couple of putts and think that okay, well I've got 2 or 3 close here, so I'm good to go, and they get out there and it's just disaster on the green. So that's something I think that. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
How many times have you seen one of the things that I encourage my students to do and players is how do you come about trying to figure out how fast the greens are today? That's the question. I agree with everything you're saying, but the routine to do that, and I think Mike and Greg may chime in on this as well, is I encourage them to step off a 20-footer. Know how hard you got to hit a 20-foot putt today. Is that, on flat ground? And that gives you that sense of feel of what you got to do. Is I always ask people, well, what club you going to hit from 100 yards? Oh, pitching wedge. Yep. Well, how hard you going to hit a 20-footer? And they give you a deer in the headlights. They don't know. They don't have a clue. So how in the world are you going to figure out how hard to hit it on the green when it counts? So you can't even tell me how hard it's to hit it when it doesn't count. And I think Greg can probably chime in on this a little bit with the emotional balance of what that brings to your putting stroke.
Greg, you want to add on that?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a good point, Clint, for sure. And I think there's so much to this game that's overlooked, and Clint brings up a huge point right there for sure. It's just people like my program because they like the fact that I ask questions that they've never heard of before. Well, Clint's bringing up a point right now that I think a lot of players just don't really ever take the time to think about or really analyze because you get so caught up in so much of the wrong stuff. But yeah, a big part of it for sure is staying emotionally balanced, and that's a huge part of what I teach in my program and in my seminars. And it's it's one of the most difficult things in golf is to constantly create that emotional balance. And I remember the first time I saw a tour player not lose his temper 20-25 years ago, where I was really aware of the fact that. And these guys hit bad shots, and they don't get upset. No, they just know how to control their emotions. It's not that they're not upset with it; they just know how to control their emotions. So it's such an overlooked but important part of this game that I call it the silent killer, because it's hurting so many people's short games. It hurts their putting. It hurts every aspect of their game, but nobody's taking the time to really address it, and that's what I bring front and center in my coaching program is how to really control your energy.
Right, and I think too, Greg, just to add a little bit to that, I think one of probably the most overlooked aspects of golf, certainly not at the pro level. I think they have enough people around them and they've played the game long enough to understand this, but the mental side of golf really is overlooked by the average player. Everybody's worried about hitting the driver 300 yards, and they're worried about lowering their score and that, but they don't really understand because they don't have access, or at least they haven't until now. Really haven't had access to the expertise on how to handle and balance out the mental side of their game. And I think once they tap into that and understand that plays a much bigger role in the golf game than what the average person realizes, and those that have worked with somebody such as yourself and others that are out there have a better appreciation just how important the mental side of golf and feelings and all of these things. People don't realize how important that is and how it's going to, obviously, as you mentioned earlier in the program, if you're carrying a lot of baggage from the day, whether it's a snarky email from a customer or something like that, and it's wearing heavy on your head, or rather in your head, you're going to bring a lot of that baggage to the golf course, and right away you might as well just turn around, get in your car, and go home, because you're going to have a rotten round anyways, in most cases, unless you're able to control those emotions, as you said. So this is an area of the game that really I think the average high handicapper out there really needs to spend more time on, certainly equal time to what they are at the driving range. Would you agree?
If you're asking me, the answer.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I absolutely agree. And I always joke with about Tiger Woods. We're not going to see him this year, but I joke about him and Sean Foley out there at night with their coal miner hats on and hitting golf balls in the dark. I'm thinking to myself, Tiger, just go back to your room and visualize hitting great shots for the next 30 minutes or 60 minutes, as opposed to hitting more golf. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a huge part of the game, Ted. Everybody says what's more important, physical side. It's all important, but it all starts with how you think.
It's a package, and you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Let me ask a question of Greg here, and Mike can chime in too. And Ted, you called it mental, but is it really mental that they're missing, or is it emotional? I see it as being two different things. Mentally, they know where they're at, they know what they're trying to do, but and coming back to Greg's point, to me, it's more emotional than it is mental. Is that something?
Right? Awesome point, Clint. I'm glad you brought this up, and I was even going to say this to you, Ted. We all call it the mental game, but think about what mental means. What's the first word that comes to mind when you think about mental?
You're crazy.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, you're crazy.
So, right,
Greg,
crazy.
Greg, you and I must have come from the same cut of cloth, man. I'm loving this.
Yeah, so everybody, I had to overcome this huge fear of public speaking, and the only way that I was going to do it, I knew, was through this organization called Toastmasters, which is this international public speaking group that helps people who have a fear. Well, my fear was so strong that I thought my situation was hopeless, blah blah blah, but just the association of the word Toastmasters intimidated me. So when we talk about the mental game, it intimidates the average golfer, because what do they think about their mental game?
That is lacking. They don't know what to do with it.
Right, exactly. My mental game stinks. I have a terrible mental game. My mental game kills me. Well, let's not refer to it as such. Because what are we doing? We're communicating. So I call it the communication game, because that's what you're doing with yourself. You're transcending this message, and it all happens in milliseconds of time, but you're communicating this information to your subconscious that your body is picking up on, physiologically, and all of a sudden your swing is impacted by it. So if you enhance the way that you communicate, both internally and externally, and you enhance your overall communication and dialogue 24/7 on and off the golf course, you're going to become a better golfer, period. But you have to think of it as the communication game, and as a result, you start improving the way that you communicate.
With yourself?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
And with others, Clinton. That's a huge part of it. And, one of the things that I talk about is don't say don't. We're always saying don't leave it short, don't chunk it, don't short-side yourself, don't blow it, don't choke. Well, if you drop don't off of any of those sentences, you're left with the exact message of what you're trying to accomplish. So if you say things like hit my target or put the ball in the hole, now all of a sudden there's no gray there. There's the message that you're sending is exactly what you want. So if you start to improve the way that you communicate both on and off the golf course, you are going to constantly become a better player.
It's a positive objective versus a negative objective. Is that what you're saying? That's part of it, Clint. But it's much deeper than that, because what this is it puts you into it's very uncomfortable for you not to say, don't leave it short. Right.
Or, if you have little kids, don't throw your food on the floor, or don't hit your sister, as opposed to keep your hands to yourself or keep your food on the table. We all fire off the word don't. So improving the way that you communicate about your game isn't just on the golf course, it's 24/7. And I say it all the time to my students, this is more learning how to communicate properly for your golf game is more difficult than learning a new language, because when you learn a new language, you're just focused on the new words. When you're trying to communicate with your new language for your golf game, and what I teach in my 9-week program, now you're in battle with your old communication, your old language, and your old patterns, and you have to consciously think about, how would I say this? How would I think about this? How should I feel right now? What should I be focused on? And these automatic negative thoughts, they just fire, and they've been firing since before you were born. This stuff is embedded and encoded in our DNA from before we even come into this earth. So to try and correct it takes months and weeks and months and years.
I think one of the things that Mike talks about in the R3 is about how we change that routine and how difficult it is. Mike, won't you? I don't mean to run your show, Ted, but I know Mike has a lot to say about what Greg was just talking about.
Well, have we bounced too far away from pre-shot routines?
Yeah, we passed that.
Yeah,
Mike.
we're coming back full circle on that. Mike, if you will, just take a few moments if you need to
sure.
Expand on that, as Clint said. But then I need to get back on track here.
Sure. Yeah, it's awesome. In the R3 approach, we kind of use it. This is all the same kind of stuff said different ways, and it's all awesome. There's basically 4 perspectives that we talk about that when we look to genuinely improve the way we play, we do it from 4 different perspectives, and we're going to blend these different things together. This has to happen, a blending process. Perspective 1 has to do with our mindfulness. As a golfer, it's our belief system. Perspective 2 is mechanical, has all to do with the golf club, what the golf club is doing during the swing. It's a tool. And then perspective 3, it's the physical perspective, has to do with our body and how our body supports the swing. And then the 4th perspective is the tactical perspective, and it has to do with our brain. And there's a difference between our brain and our mind, for sure. And the brain is the mechanism that produces the thoughts that the mind creates, So the difference between emotional processes and mental processes is this. Emotional processes are reflexive feelings. In other words, we can't avoid them. We're going to feel the sting of a missed 3-foot putt, Whereas mental processes are thoughts, attitudes, and decisions. We can control our mental decisions there. Our mental processes we can control. Our emotional processes are out of our control. We're going to feel stuff. It's up to our mental process to determine how it is we're going to deal with those emotional reflexive feelings that we're experiencing out there. And this is where Greg excels, I'm sure, in terms of helping folks to understand how to blend these aspects of that tactical perspective together in such a way that we build a stronger belief system. We understand what the confidence cycle is all about, because we all go through, the confidence cycle in terms of playing with confidence at one point, then during the course of the round, we're going to get a little shaky, we're going to lose that confidence, then we're going to regain that confidence. So it's a continuous cycle that we'll go through, and it all has to do with those mental and emotional processes that are taking place, It's awesome stuff. It's a lot of fun to talk about and think about. And it's even more fun to genuinely improve at the blending process, where all of this is being put together in such a way that we, at the end of the day, are excited about our games and feel like we're moving in a good direction, in a good positive direction. That's what it's all about.
Right.
It's
Right.
That's right.
And I know one of you earlier, and I don't recall who mentioned that, but and Clint, it might have been you, but about the tour players, when they've gotten in a bad place or hit a bad shot, you don't see their emotions
that
as
Greg.
easily as you would say. Was that you, Clint?
No, it was Greg.
Greg, I apologize.
No problem.
Right, and that's so true. And there is such a big difference. And I think if the amateur players were able to get a better handle on their emotions as the tour players have, and obviously, the average high handicapper is not spend as much time or be as diligent as some of the tour players are, of course. But I think if they had a better handle on their emotions, they would certainly see much more improvement as opposed to jumping out and spending the $400 on a new driver, as I've mentioned on the program before. Yeah. Maybe that $400 could be better spent connecting with a great head coach like Greg Liberto is here on the panel. Guys, let me move on to the next question here. I need to take control back of the show here, as Clint said, so if you don't mind, I want to keep this moving back. I'm having fun, guys. Don't worry about it. It's good. The real thing about this show, guys, let me just say this very quickly, particularly since we've got a couple of newcomers to the show. Really one of the purposes of doing Golf Talk Live, but more importantly doing Coach's Corner, is we've all been on on different platforms of social media, and we see lots of dialogue, conversation going, and it's great for us in the business to be able to communicate and exchange ideas. But for the average person out there, there are so many different directions that people can go to, and I wanted to create a vessel, if you will. I've said this many times in the program, where people can come to, and instead of just reading a lot of posts and blogs and this sort of thing, they can actually listen to some great teacher professionals and coaches and mental gurus, that sort of thing out there, sort of a place they can come and get all this information instead of just reading it on somebody's blog and so forth. And not that I'm taking away from anybody's websites. I certainly encourage people to visit them, but I think this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this and bring a panel each week and have some discussion. So I don't mind it, having some dialogue in that, and I certainly don't mind even being challenged occasionally. Thank you, Clint.
Okay.
But anyways, you raise a valid point. You're right, and I think it's just I'm a little bit maybe at times old school, and it's one of those patterns you hate to you need to break. And you're right that the word mental does carry a stigma with it, and you're right. I think really the terminology today needs to be more on an emotional level, and you raise a valid point. So I'm going to be more conscious of being conscious of that. But anyways, guys, let me move on to the next question here. And this is actually from a young lady over in Dublin, Ireland, if you can believe that. Her name is Sarah. And yeah, we get some great questions coming from all over the globe, and this is one of the things I love doing this panel. And here's what she had to say in her email, guys. I enjoy playing golf whenever I can. In fact, I found it to be a little addictive. I currently play to a 19 handicap and want to know how to bring my score down. What are some key areas of my game I should be focusing on to help me accomplish that? Now, let me just say this before I jump in. Mike, I'm going to let you start it with this question here just to give you a turn first. But you can tell that this is coming from a young lady because most guys would not be as articulate in their question as what Sarah has done here. So let's see if we can help. No, it's like, how do I bring my score? I want to shoot, I want to be a 5 handicap instead of a 19. And she wants to know specifically where she needs to be focusing in her game. We've obviously talked, and let's exclude temporarily here if we can, just because we've talked about it, the emotional side. Let's get on the physical side here if we can for this one. Mike, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. That's awesome. Sarah should absolutely do exactly what she's doing. Look for good information. Begin with the end in mind, we like to say in the archery approach. And when it comes to playing the game of golf, there's imitation is the seed of genius, So look at YouTube videos of golfers swinging a golf club, and then begin to imitate those positions. Understand what a good, mechanically sound swing and a physically athletic swing is and looks like. If we have a good understanding, if we're beginning with an end in mind that has us putting the golf club into, acceptable positions as we swing it, then the chances of hitting a decent shot are greatly increased. So just kind of having a good idea, a good concept in her mind of what the swing should look like, and then go ahead and get in front of a mirror with a golf club and begin to imitate these positions. If she has the opportunity to have her swing videoed or filmed by someone who's helping her, that's awesome to do, because pictures are worth 1,000 words when it comes to it's all about developing good motor patterns. It's all about developing those circuits in our brain that are going to allow us to repeat that movement without thinking about it. That requires correct and sufficient repetition, and it's very important that we understand the correct part of that. Quite often folks will do sufficient amount of practicing, but it's not on the kinds of movements that they might want to be programming into their process. So look at pictures, look at YouTube videos, look for the information in terms of what a simple mechanically sound swing is all about. And then as far as the physical process, that has to do with their body, that has to do with our rhythm and timing, and just the athletic posture that we have, and the movements that we're going to be making in order to support that club as we swing it. So I would say to Sarah, get your swing videoed if you can. Get some feedback from someone who keeps it simple for her, and then just imitate those who do it well.
Well said. And Clint, we're going to move on to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ted. Well, Mike said it quite well. I think that I would step back just a little bit further off of that and to ask her to tell me, try to determine what her strengths and weaknesses are. We talk a lot in the R3 about proper practice and being able to be efficient with your time. And I would like for her to know how many strokes she takes from 100 yards to the hole. How many strokes is she taking from 100 yards outside from that? And then she can determine where her strengths are at that will improve as she plays, and also then gives her an opportunity to go say, well, look, I'm 3-putting 8 times. 60% of my strokes are from 100 yards to the hole, and if she wants to lower her handicap, she obviously needs to lower her score. And we talk a lot about advancement games versus scoring game. She needs to analyze whether her advancement game is acceptable, and then focus on the scoring aspects, or it may be a blend of both. But I would really like to see her analyze around the golf or several to determine really where she's losing her strokes from, where she could focus her practice, get good instructions, as Mike said, on those physical positions of chipping the ball better or putting the ball better or pitching it better, in order to be able to she could efficiently use her time to lower her score. But I think you have to make an analysis to be able to prepare and to improve on how you're going to lower your score. So that would be the first thing I would tell her. She needs to understand where she needs to go.
Well said. Excellent points as well, Clint. And Greg, you want to add to Sarah's dilemma here?
Sure. Yeah, and obviously both Clint and Mike came up with some great ideas, and I'm just going to add a couple of things to what each of them said. In terms of what Mike said, finding a swing that you like, and practicing your swing in the mirror. One of the things that I teach my students, this is something that I learned from a book called The Talent Code, is to when you're happy with the mechanics of your swing, what I have my students do is close their eyes and just go through and swing as slow as they can in slow motion. And this really allows you to just take your swing in from a completely different perspective. It feels differently, not only in terms of physically how you feel it, but it feels differently emotionally. It's kind of an awkward thing to do when you first do it, but for some people, if you really enjoy it, it just gives you a different perspective on your swing, and it helps sometimes slow your swing down if you swing too fast as well. But it's just a different way to go about, kind of a different way to train yourself, so to speak. And then to add what Clint said, one of the things that I teach is a concept called your 2 lengths, and it's about identifying the single most thing that you need to do to play the best golf you've ever played. And Clint was talking about, figuring out what your strengths and weaknesses are. That's huge. But you also need to trim it down and just say, okay, if there's one thing that I can do to play the best golf I've ever played, what is it? Better ball striker, increased confidence, increased focus, better pre-shot routine, and then you can build around it from there. And, there's a million ways, I think, to answer this question, but As opposed to getting so focused on score, Sarah, what I would say to you is really, really simple. It's what I tell every one of my students. You need to be consumed with becoming the absolute best golfer you can become. And you becoming the best that you can possibly become is going to get your focus away from score and bring the focus on you. You don't have control over your score or the final score of your round. Sure, you have control over improving your handicap and all of that, but if you're more focused on becoming the best player that you can become, identify your strengths and weaknesses, fine-tune your swing, find a mentor, find a great teaching pro, figure out what you need, what you need to do to play the best golf. All of that's great information, but ultimately, big picture, you just need to be consumed with becoming the best player that you can become, and then go from there.
Well said. Excellent points, guys. And I know Sarah over in Dublin, Ireland, is going to get some great advice from three very talented professionals in the game. And I think it's important, that they don't focus on the score. You're right. I think sometimes people get too caught up in the numbers, and golf is a very certainly a very complex game. But once you have the proper tools, not just in your physical side, but in the mental side, the game becomes much easier to cope with and handle, and you really ultimately have more fun because you're able to assess, as Clint had talked about, assess how many shots you're hitting from 100 yards in and then conversely 100 yards out. Once you kind of narrow those down a little bit and get an idea of where your strengths and weaknesses are, then it allows you to have a better practice session as well. And it gives you something also, too, that you can take to your coach or your teacher and say, these are areas here are my stats, if you will, as opposed to, well, I'm a 15 or a 19 or a 10 handicap. Here's some areas that I have troubles with, and here's kind of the stats I've put together. And it gives that instructor a little bit of a mental picture, if you will, of what they need to focus that individual's sessions on. And that we can get from our students, certainly the better equipped we're going to be to help them out in the long run. So great answers, guys. I want to move on, and I don't mean to make light of this, but I want to make sure that we move on and get to another question here because time's moving pretty fast here, so I apologize. The next question here is from Daryl, and this was an interesting one. I had to read this one here because it kind of follows in a little bit with some of what we've been talking about. Daryl is from San Antonio, Texas, and he comments here first. He says, I play every week in a foursome. We've been playing together for a few years now, and as a collective group, find practicing boring. My friends and I want to know what the panel would suggest we do to make our practice time a little more interesting. Do you have any suggestions? And Clint, we've gone full circuit. We're going to come back up to you. Clint, you want to start us off? How can we help Daryl out in San Antonio?
I'm the wrong person to ask that question because I think practice is boring too. But it's a necessary part. It's a necessary part of improving. You just have to find how you make it exciting. To go out and practice. Do you find something new? I think that Mike can attest. Mike spends a lot of time with me on the practice tee because I do hit a lot of balls and stuff. But I have recently rediscovered the fact that what makes practice kind of fun is to go out with a true purpose of what you're wanting to do today. Never step on the practice tee unless you have a definite objective on what you're going to work on. And that, to me, gives me some initiative to go out and say, okay, I'm going to hit this basket of balls here, and I'm going to work on staying flexed on the ball every shot. That's my objective. It's not just hitting good shots, changing that idea every time I go to the range. What am I really working on today? And that kind of keeps it fresh. And that's how I try to get over that boring portion of just hitting balls. I get to a point now, and haven't been that way all along here lately, is just going out and banging balls is boring.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. That's an excellent point, Clint. And let me bounce this on down to
Sure.
Greg next, if I may. Greg, do you think that maybe part of the problem, taking Clint's point here, comments, do you think that maybe that's part of the reason why so many people find their practice sessions a little boring. And I'm not talking about with an instructor, but I'm just talking when they go to the driving range or the practice tees, that they don't really go with it with a sense of purpose, that they just sort of out there, as Clint mentioned, banging balls and that. Do you think that that's part of the problem? And how do we sort of retrain the average golfer out there into, practicing with some purpose?
Sure. No, it's a hugely important topic, and Clint's exactly right. You have to have an objective. I call it a strategy. Every time, the reason that players fail in transitioning effectively from the range to the course, you guys have probably heard it, I'm sure. Oh, geez, I wish I could just bring you with me out on the golf course. Well, it's because of the fact that they're going to the range without an objective or without a strategy, and they're just aimlessly hitting golf balls. And then you go to the course, and especially if you're playing in competition, you have anxiety and fear and stress and self-doubt and uncertainty, and you're not calm and totally relaxed like you were on the range. So your mindset, your approach, your emotional state is totally different. But one of the ways to not only practice with purpose, but to transition more effectively from the range to the course, and it goes back to this whole thing of with Sarah, don't focus on lowering your handicap, focus on becoming your best. It's the same thing as you need to focus on playing golf with purpose. It's not just practicing with purpose, it's playing with purpose. So you practice and you play with purpose. And the one way that you do that is you have a strategy every single time that you leave the house when you go to the golf course, whether you're practicing and if your strategy is just hit my target, or whether you're going to the course and your strategy is stay calm and relaxed. It doesn't matter, but a strategy is a big part of it. And then to just more directly answer the question, one of the ways to get more creative, especially if you guys are playing in a group, was it Derek or Daryl? Ted, the name of the?
It was yes, it was Daryl. Yeah, Daryl from San Antonio.
Daryl, one of the things that you can do, especially if you guys go as a group, is this is an awesome opportunity for you guys to not only get creative but get competitive with each other. Pick a specific target, have best of 3 competitions, or get really creative with the shaping of your shots and envision a fairway or a specific target, and constantly change your clubs, constantly change your targets, constantly change the shape of your shot. Think about how you play golf. You're always playing golf with a different club in your hand. You don't hit 36 irons in a row at the same target.
Right.
So have a strategy, be creative, be competitive on the range, but most importantly, make sure that you just focus on playing golf with purpose, whether you're practicing or whether you're playing.
Excellent. I couldn't have said it better myself. Mike, I'm going to let you round out this one here, and then we'll do one more question, and then we'll talk briefly a little bit about the Masters. Mike, you want to throw some thoughts here for Daryl?
Yeah, very, very briefly. Both shots very well played. Yeah, Clint hit it on the head when it's all about intent and purpose, and Greg hit it on the head when he brought in the fact that it's about competition. It's truly about competition that it's through the process of competition that we improve. And, if we don't make our practicing, our game improvement process competitive at we call it there's the static level, that's just us competing against ourselves. And then there's the dynamic competition, which is us competing against another person or a field of folks. We're always competing against ourselves to become better, So if the practice session is boring for Daryl, then he might have a good look at that his intent and purpose. If he's not really interested in getting better or improving, then practice is going to be boring. He's going to get just kind of remain stuck there and not really and truly genuinely improve, as we call it. But if he does decide that he wants to genuinely improve, he's going to get a little bit competitive about it, and that's when we. I think it was Wayne Dyer that said, when the way we look at things, the things we're looking at change. Well, that's what will happen with his practicing processes. He'll see the practicing process differently in terms of intent and purpose. And when we bring in that element of competition, well, that's when practicing becomes a lot of fun. And it's all about getting excited about your practicing process. What is it that I'm going to go out and work on today? You're going to look for better information or new information, new ideas and concepts to explore and try. That's I enjoy the practicing and the challenge of improving just as much, maybe even a little more than actually playing the game. So there's a lot to be gained from that part of the game if we understand what it is that it's truly all about, and it's about improving, and improving is to do with intent and purpose, and intent and purpose is to do with competition. Well played, guys.
Nice. Yeah, some great comments, guys, and I know that we're going to help Daryl out in San Antonio hopefully have a little bit more fun and make it less boring on the practice range. And it is true what you've all very eloquently pointed out, and I'll just sort of reconfirm. You do have to obviously not only practice, but you need to play with some purpose as well. And I think that more often than not, people go sort of with that same sort of routine, going to the driving range or the practice range, and don't really have a sense of purpose while they're there, and just ultimately end up hitting ball after ball doing the same thing. And I see that all the time. When I go up and practice myself, what I do in addition to obviously doing my own little practice session, I'll watch, I'll observe up and down the range, and I'll look and see what people are doing. And the ones that always get me, there's really 2 or 3 different types. One that always gets me is there'll be one there, he'll hit a ball, and then he'll be yakking with his buddy there, and he's not really focusing on what he's doing. And he'll get up and step up and hit another shot and walk back and be talking about new tires on his car. And sometimes, you may not have a lot of time before a round, so you can't really get into a full-blown session. But, if you're going to go and spend the time and effort going to the driving range, you need to definitely go there with a purpose and intent in mind. And if you're, if you want to talk with your buddy there a little bit, that's okay. But both of you need to really be focused on what you're there for, and then talk about it after. Talk about the tires or whatever it is. Your wife just spent $3,000 on, a new bracelet or something, whatever you want to talk about. But do that off the range. And forgive me, ladies, don't email me any hate mail or anything. But anyways, my point is that you have to go with a sense of purpose. I know I'm going to get some out of that one.
Oh yeah, you're in trouble now.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially with the launch of my new program, Women of Golf. I'm sure I'll get a lot there. But all in jest. But guys, let me because we're really getting pressed for a hard time here. I don't want to cut into to Greg's time here. So this last question, excuse me, I wanted to pick because I thought this is really an important one. This is from George in Florida. And George writes in, he says, I'm a senior player, 60 plus, and give me exact age, so he's moving that needle up a little bit. He said, I'm looking to pick up the game again after a few years, and he's gotten in brackets here 10 years hiatus due to my hip surgery. I played to a 10 handicap at one time, but haven't really picked up a club in at least 5 of the last 10 years, so surgery was tough. He decided to dust off the old clubs and give it a go. Do you have any suggestions on where I should start? So I think we started with you, Clint. So, Greg, let's start with you real quick here. And what can you suggest for George here? Obviously played a lot of golf over the years, had a setback with a surgery, and for whatever reason didn't get right back into it for quite a few years. But obviously the bug has bitten him once again, and he wants to get out there. So what would you suggest, first off, that George needs to do when picking this game back up after a hiatus, as he said?
Man, again, another question that could be answered a million different ways, but I think I'll just, I'll start at the highest level possible with it and just,
okay.
Say to George what I say to every one of my golfers that I start, first session of my coaching program is we go through and we figure out, what do you want from this game? And if you are having this, sort of second go around with the game, George, I would recommend that you take time and just, whether it's going to be something that's real simple and just recreational or whatever it might be, but, we go through, and this is an hour-long session of going through and having a conversation of what do you really want from this game? And it's not just, I want to get better, I want to have a lower handicap, or I want to, have fun, or I want to be able to play in, better in competition. No, it's about going really deep and identifying the utopian fantasy of what you want from this game and, constructing a lengthy sentence, but a very succinct message to yourself about what the best case scenario is of what you want from this game, and then we go and identify the harsh reality of where things are today. So when you compare and contrast the two, and then you create a corresponding image for each, now all of a sudden you have direction, and you have focus, and you have motivation, and you have clarity. So you're not just like starting from any obscure point and going, well, let me just go find a pro and just start taking. That might end up being your first step once you identify what you want from the game. But I think that's a really important question that everybody needs to answer, Ted, is if you could describe the best case scenario of what you want from the game of golf, what is it? And people need to really think about that question, and whether this is a business for you or whether it's a recreational game or whether it's your livelihood, from a playing perspective, you need to answer that question.
Yeah, and I agree, excuse me, pardon me, wholeheartly with that. I think you really have to understand, first and foremost, what it is you want from the game, whether you want to play at a competitive level or if it's just a recreation, because that really dictates where you want to go and what your next move is. Because if you're just going to be a recreational player and you just want to play once in a while, then you're going to certainly have a different approach. So that's a very valid point, and I think a lot of people, obviously, and in George's case, of course, one thing I want to add to Greg, just very quickly here, and then we're going to move on to Mike, and then we'll finish up with Clint, is he indicates here in the note that he played to a 10 handicap at one time. I think number one and first and foremost, after he does what you suggested, Greg, I think he also has to be realistic and understand that, even though he was once a 10 handicap, he's not going to jump back into those shoes right off the bat. He may never get back to a 10. He may be lucky and have a horseshoe and be able to jump right back in and do that. Not likely in most cases, but it is possible. But he has to be realistic that he's going to be starting from a different level, and it may take him a while to get his feet, back in the game. And so that's something that, George, you need to be conscious of as well. Is obviously you got your game down to a pretty good handicap, but you may not be there at this time. So just take it slow and go out and get some great instruction, but find out what it is that you want to get from the game first, and what it is you want to accomplish before you take that step. Mike, do you want to continue on there?
Sure. That follows the same approach that we use in the R3 approach, beginning with the end in mind. What's our objective? What do we want to do, and how we want to get there? I would say to George, if I was meeting up with him tomorrow, I'd say, listen, George, let's get excited about this. Welcome back to the game. This is awesome. Yeah. You were a 10 handicapper one time. That's still in there. Those neural patterns are still in there. We just got to touch them again. We got to kind of go back and revisit those things and go ahead and get those circuits firing again. Now, you got a new hip, so there might be some circuits that need to be built as far as working that hip back into the swing. But I'd be real positive about it. I'd be saying, listen, let's go. Let's get that club in our hand and start making some swings. Go see what happens. That's a little bit of static competition. Go compete with yourself, see how good you can hit it, see how many 5-footers you can make, out of 10. And then just start having that, blend in a little bit of static competition with the improvement process. But that's awesome. That's what we need. We need people coming back to the game who are excited about it and look forward to the improvement process. And we're going to have to improve from all those different perspectives. The mind, the body, the club. Yeah, wonderful.
Excellent point, Mike. And Clint, certainly last but not least.
Well, y'all are going to be greatly surprised here, but I can't add a thing to that. I mean, I would just
I'm going to
do what they're going to do. Yeah,
I'm going to tweak it just a little bit and modify the question because I do want an answer from you. So here's what we're going to do. I have to get even here. I'm throwing you back under the bus.
I know you're going to.
Here we go. And it's a mighty big bus. We only have a couple of minutes, so please. But anyways, here we go. What I want to do is that obviously, the fact that there was such a long period The first thing that I think of here is obviously there may have been some complications as a result of it, and I'm only guessing, but most people that have played a long time, as he certainly has indicated, but he's had to take a long hiatus. I suspect there may have been some issues or complications as a result, and obviously that he wants to get back in the game. Right. I'm assuming those are now in the past, but there may be some physical challenges. There may be some adjustments that need to be made. What are some things that maybe he should do in order to help overcome maybe some obstacles that may be there now that weren't there before?
Well, obviously, the obvious answer there, he needs to make sure whoever his surgeon was that replaced the hip is fully aware of what he's wanting to do, and to make sure that he is physically able to do that. If he feels like that he still need maybe some more physical work, I would suggest that he find a really a good trainer, get to the gym, create some flexibility maybe in those hips, but to follow his doctor's instructions on how he's going to get himself physically able to get back into the game and take it slow. I mean, Mike's correct. Go out and just hit a small bucket of balls a day. See what's happening. Take your time. But certainly would want to look at the physical aspects, and I would agree that obviously he quit because he had pain in the hip and got it replaced. But I would certainly encourage him to make sure through his physicians and surgeons and maybe a physical therapist to make sure he's capable of making those moves without further damage.
Yeah, and Ted, if I could just add one other point.
Sure.
Point to what Clint said, that's something that I've had personal experience with now is Titleist Performance Institute, or TPI, who you've probably seen on the Golf Channel or maybe in some other areas in and around the game. Their website is mytpi.com, and if he were to put in his zip code, he might find a TPI certified instructor or trainer. But the advantage of working with a TPI professional is not only is their program designed for functional movement of the body for golfers, but when you work with a TPI professional who is also a licensed chiropractor, not only can they help you with the movements, but they can help you with the physical adjustments that need to be made in your body. And I will tell you that, I'm 50, so I'm not a kid anymore, and I played a lot of sports, and I feel great, and I work out. But when I first started my assessment with TPI, I failed miserably. So, there's a lot of the body is very unique, and the swing is very unique, and how your body responds to it. And, when we get to be 50, 60 years old and older, our body changes, and you really need to understand what functional movements of the body you need to implement so you can successfully swing the club the way you want to, and you have to know your limitations. This takes months and years to improve, but I just wanted to add to what Clint said because it's such a huge component of this as, somebody who is 60 years old is looking to get back into the game.
Yeah, that's an excellent point and a great way to wrap up the Coach's Corner segment tonight, guys. You did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. Let me just, I did say earlier on we are going to do this, so we'll have to make this part of it real quick. Obviously, we're on the cusp of the Masters tournament here in 2014, and at last glance, Bill Haas was leading the pack at 4 under par. Very quickly, we'll go around. Clint, we'll start with you real quick. What are your predictions? Who do you like?
I got to pull for Bill Haas because he's a local kid from Greenville, South Carolina. It's Jay Haas's son, and we're all connected up here, and we're going to pull for him. I've got to pull for Fred Couples because he's the old guy in the field for Greg there. Yeah. And but I got to put my money on McIlroy. I think it's his turn.
You think Rory? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's his turn.
Okay. Greg, who do you like for the Masters this week?
I'm pretty close. I got 2 of the 3. So my 1, 2, 3s are McIlroy, Mickelson, and Couples. And who do I want to see win? Sure, I'd love to see Freddie win it. I've been a fan of his forever, but it's obviously it's the best tournament in the world, and I don't know. I for some reason I've been paying attention to McIlroy over the past year, and I feel like it's his time again.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. Let me, Mike, let me just get you in here. Mike, who do you like for the Masters?
Yes, I haven't seen anything. I don't know what the scores are. I don't know. Stenson played really well last year. He sure looks strong as a golfer. I'd love to see McIlroy do well. That'd be exciting. And you got to love Big Phil. I mean, if Phil was in the mix, it'd be good for golf.
Well, let me give you the top group here. You've got Bill Haas at 4 under, Adam Scott at 3 under. Gosh, I don't even know. Is it Louis Oosthuizen? I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Oosthuizen, yeah.
Oosthuizen. I was close. 3 under. He's tied with second with Adam and also Bubba Watson. And then we've got Kevin Statler and a whole group of guys, Gary Woodland, Jimmy Walker, KJ Choi, and Brant Snedeker, and also Mark Leishman at 2 under.
Awesome.
So that's your group right there.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of with the first two. I think I would like to, in a perfect world, I'd love to see Freddie, just because I turned 50 about a month ago, and so I'm getting into that. I'm creeping up into that age group now, and certainly would love. But I can't tell you who's going to win the Masters this year, but I can tell you who's not going to win the Masters this year. Of course, Tiger Woods. Had to throw that in there. Sorry, Tiger. Guys, I want to thank you for participating in the Coach's Corner panel tonight. I had a great time. And Greg, if you want to just hang tight here, very quickly, if Clint, if you want to just give a quick little plug on the site and so forth before you go.
Cool. Yeah, that's cool. Ted, again, it's been great fun. I really do enjoy being on the show with you. Do it anytime you need us to. But anybody out there wants to take a look at what we're doing at TGM, the R3 Golf Academy, they just got to go to tgmgolf.com, and all the information's there. We'd love to have some interaction with you. Just let us know if we can help you. But, again, it's been great fun. Thanks, Ted.
You're welcome, Clint. I always enjoy having you back. And you're welcome back. You know you have an open invitation here anytime, and I appreciate you coming on. Mike, I'm going to let you, Greg, I'm not going to let you do this at this point. You'll get to do another plug at the end of your session there. But, Mike, if you want to go ahead as well, is there anything that you want to plug very quickly here before we
Yeah, again, I appreciate the opportunity to come on in with you guys. It was a lot of fun. Sure was. I'll just ditto Clint there. TGMGolf.com is our business site, and I have a little personal site there, MikeLawrenceGolf.com. Enjoy the
Excellent. Mike, I want to thank you for stepping up last minute on the program like that, and Clint, thank you for helping out there as well. And, of course, Greg, we're going to continue on here in just a moment. But, guys, thank you very much for chiming in on the Coach's Corner panel tonight. I know that the listening audience here enjoys hearing their questions answered. You guys did a fantastic job. It was one of my favorite Coach's Corner segments since we've been starting it here a little over a month ago. So let's keep the momentum going. Guys, have a great week. Enjoy the Masters, and we'll see, Clint, if your predictions hold true. We'll see if Freddie's going to come in number 1.
I hope so. Good night, everybody. Good night.
All right.
Good night.
All right, good night. All right, good night, guys. Okay, Greg, it's just you and I. Greg, if you need to take a moment or two, I've got a couple things to read out if you want to, and then we'll get right back in and we'll start on with your interview. How's that?
Sounds great.
Okay. Just for those of you that are tuning in here a little bit later in the program, don't forget we are live until 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on blogtalkradio.com. And, of course, it's /Golf Talk Live. If you want to call into the program, you can certainly do so at area code 646-716-4667, or you can email questions throughout the program at questions.golftalklive@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us or follow me, actually, on Twitter at TedandBuckCEO. I certainly appreciate all the people that have been following me here in the last little while. And also you can get some updates on the other social media, Facebook at facebook.com/Golf Talk Live blog. And don't forget, we are every Thursday night live here on Golf Talk Live starting at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. The Coach's Corner panel runs the first hour, and the latter hour, of course, is when I have my guests on. Greg, if you're still with me there, let's begin. My special guest this evening is, of course, the head coach, Greg Liberto. Greg, welcome back to Golf Talk Live.
Thanks, Ted. Excited to be back.
Let's, I obviously, there were some specific things. I know that you've got a lot on your plate, and there's a lot of things that we can talk about, and I don't know if we're going to be able to get to them all, but we're going to get through as much as we can. You mentioned, and I'm going to sort of start not so much at the beginning, but I want to start with something that you mentioned earlier on in the segment here, and that was being 100% ready. Let's start there first. Explain to the listeners here what you mean by being 100% ready.
Sure. Yeah, it's an excellent starting point. And, I can't confirm the number, but, there's over 99% of golfers that are just showing up to the golf course, and most of them are going there with expectations of shooting a number, and that's really about it. And, there's so much to this game, Ted, and we all, you and I are talking because we love the game of golf, and obviously the people that are listening are listening because they love the game of golf. But, there's so much to this game that we're missing, and a big part of it is just really enjoying every single moment out there. And I know that that's not realistic every single second of every round, but what happens when you go to the golf course and you're expecting to shoot a certain number, and you're on the 14th hole, and you know that the only way that you're going to reach that number is if you eagle out for the rest of your round. What happens?
Yeah, you
right? Frustrated,
yeah,
anxious, everything. So all these emotions start to come into play. And then as a result, what happens is you perform poorly, and then you go to the course and you do the same thing the next day. So you have these recurring negative patterns, and that's one of the things that Mike touched on earlier is these patterns that we get into, in the coach's corner call earlier, is we get into these patterns, and we need to figure out how to change them or to shift them. And one of the ways to do that is by showing up to the golf course 100% ready, but also having this pre-shot routine that allows you to get in the zone on every single shot. And the way that it works is number one, to create emotional balance. So you have to let putt from the previous hole goal, or the gentleman who said something in your backswing 5 holes ago, or the lip out that you had on this hole the last time you played. There's so many things that come into play that you think about that create emotional imbalance that either gets you upset or frustrated or down or whatever it might be, angry and fearful. There's all kinds of different emotions, and the two most are fear and anger. So you have to learn how to create emotional balance so you can be calm and confident. That's step one. And then you have to pick a very specific target of where the ball is going to land, and I call it that dime spot, because that's about the size of what it takes for a golf ball to sit on, is about the size of a dime. And you have to visualize where that is, whether it's in the middle of the fairway or on the green. And you have to visualize how the ball is going to actually get to that dime spot. So if you're on the tee and you're going to hit a big high draw, okay, well then visualize that in your mind's eye and then figure out exactly where it's going to hit. And then once it lands, how is it going to respond once it hits the middle of the fairway? Is it going to roll another 20, 25 yards? So I call it watching the entire movie from start to finish, Ted. And that's really what it is. So many people have a loose interpretation of visualization. I visualize it going between the 2 trees or the 2 telephone poles. Well, okay, but what does it look like specifically, and then where is it going to land? So, you have to pick that specific target, visualize the entire flight path of the ball, and then have all of your energy committed to that target. So all you're thinking about, all that you're seeing, is that dime spot of where the ball is going to land. And this is huge around the greens, because what do some people think about? I want to get it close. Or maybe if you're thinking about put the ball in the hole, they're not thinking about where the ball has to land to put the ball in the hole. They're just saying it because that's what they know they should be saying. But if you get very specific as to where the ball is going to land and how it's going to get to the hole, now it's a totally different feeling.
Right, and I think let me just quickly interrupt here. I think, that what really sort of differentiates the professionals from the everyday, amateur golfer is the pros have that mental picture and, in their mind, that movie, if you will. They're playing in their mind. They're visualizing the shot from beginning to end, and it's not just the finish point of where the ball's going to land. It's the whole process. It's the shape of the shot, what the conditions are, and there's a whole, as you say, a short movie there that they're watching in their head. And of course, it's happening at a very fast pace, but it's happening nonetheless. And I think the average amateur, as you said, steps up to a shot and it's just, well, I just want to hit it over here, or I want to, get it into the hole, and they don't see and visualize how they're going to get it in the hole or how they're going to get it to that spot out in the fairway. And more often than not, without that sort of game plan, they're not going to succeed, and it just, all kinds of things creep in afterwards. So that's certainly important. Let me ask you this. You obviously, I know you'd sent me over a copy of a book that you put out, 18 Holes, and some things that we're going to talk about that's in that. And you really got some great points here that I want to make sure that we cover as many as possible. Obviously, we talked about earlier in the session, practicing with purpose, a little bit. So I'm going to skip over that one momentarily. But what are some of you emphasize here in one of the talking points, crushing your ants or automatic negative thoughts? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a huge part of improving your game on and off the course, Ted, for sure. Almost 90% of our thought process is negative, and it's occurring unconsciously. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that that's not doing a whole lot of good for your golf game or for your life. And if you allow those negative thoughts to persist on the course, well, they turn into, to fear and self-doubt and anger and all kinds of negative emotions. And as a result, it impacts your swing. So, I talk about in my coaching and in my seminars the different categories of automatic negative thoughts, and I give you the 3-step solution to stop these negative thoughts and actually use this negative energy as an advantage. So I teach you how to put what I call your ants or your automatic negative thoughts on high alert. We go through and identify your top 10 ants. I call them ant traps because that's exactly what they are. It's the same situations on the course that constantly get you into trouble. And a lot of it is because you're thinking the wrong way in those same situations. So, for example, if you hate hitting out of the sand, well, every time you see your ball go into the sand, you're going to have an ant. So it's a sand trap, but it's also an ant trap. You know that as soon as your ball goes into the ant or into the trap, you're going to be frustrated. Now, if you identify a sand shot or a bunker shot as an ant trap for you or a situation that gives you negative energy, now you can create a high-level strategy to get focused on hitting your target when you go into traps. So, for example, in one of my most recent coaching sessions in and around this, one of my students came up with this concept of what he calls producing the movie. So his big thing when he was, in a greenside bunker was that he would either, hit it real fat or have a tendency to skull it like most of us have done in the past. So now what his strategy when he goes into a greenside bunker now is produce the movie. He's going to watch it. He's going to visualize his shot from start to finish of how it's going to come out of the sand, where it's going to land, that dime spot, and then how it's going to release and roll into the hole. So his strategy now when he gets into the trap is produce the movie, as opposed to, I hate this shot. I'm going to skull it. I'm going to chunk it. It's going to take me 3 shots to get out of here. Totally different mindset. A 180. So now, and that's why I tell people all the time, and I think people think I'm like some kind of a crazy witch doctor, is I show people how to reverse their negative energy. And that's a prime example. If that situation always gave you negative energy, well, now that you've identified that as one of your top 10 ant traps, now you know when you're in a greenside bunker, you just think, produce the movie, produce the movie, produce the movie. Now that gives you positive energy.
Yeah.
So do you see what I mean about reversing your negative energy?
Right, and that's an area, definitely that many golfers out there, and as you said, probably 99% of the golfers suffer from, and obviously the top 1%, that's why they're out playing in the Masters this week. Golf, I've always sort of equated golf much like a book with 18 chapters. Each chapter is different. Some are uplifting, exciting chapters, of course, when we do well. Some might have a murder. You might get a triple bogey in one, and that's probably the closest thing to a murder, if you will, in a golf game is playing a bad hole. And really you have to look at it's a story. It's very mimics life, and there's going to be some ups and downs throughout that journey. And when you're playing a round of golf, what often happens with a lot of people, and I think this is where what you're trying to say here is you have to look at the whole picture, if you will, and not just allow if your first hole, as an example, you didn't get a great start, and even your second hole, you have to be able to take each chapter, if you will, on its own, and not allow those thoughts to creep in. And that's what happens. And it's not even just within a round. There's a lot of people, of course, as we both, I'm sure, have experienced, that played in a tournament 3 months ago, and they're still playing that negative loop in their head. And when every time they go out since that bad round, they're playing those god awful shots in their head. So when they get into a bunker, as you say, the first thing that goes in their mind is, gosh, how am I going to get out of here, or I'm stuck, or what have you. And instead of treating it as a new experience and reinforcing it with a positive thought that, I'm going to get the ball out, I'm going to get it on the green and set up for my next shot, they're focusing on, gosh, I'm in the bunker again, and right away they've set themselves up for failure.
Sure. Yeah, and to add to that, Ted, and this is in the book twice, is, it's a perfect segue into what happens at the end of the round in the 19th hole. What does everybody do? They focus on all the things that didn't happen.
Went wrong.
Right? Or all the things that went wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So, I call it the woulda, shoulda, coulda. Oh, I would have shot 3 strokes less if I didn't have that lip out on 17 and that, hit that bird didn't steal my ball on 12. And, all these, they come up with all these excuses as opposed to find 3 positives from your round today. And I will never forget when McIlroy was asked, I don't know if it was the start of last spring or, when he went through his equipment change with Nike and everything, and he was really having some challenges with his game, last 12 to 18 months. He shot like a 74 on Friday. I forget what tournament it was, but he was asked by one of the commentators on the Golf Channel post round. He said, "Rory, what positives can you pull from today?" He was so uncomfortable. Not only did he physically he couldn't utter a word. He was so uncomfortable. His body language changed immediately. He couldn't come up with one word. Couldn't say anything because he was so upset with his round. So and that just happens at every level.
Well, and that's what I was going to just add very quickly was, that's something that the average golfer out there needs to understand. If something like that is going to happen with a Rory McIlroy, they have to expect that it's going to happen with them. So the best way to combat that is to train yourself properly to not focus on those negatives, but focus on, 3 positives, as you said, at the end of every round. And that's something that really most people really lack in, I think. And we see it all the time when, a student comes in and they've, you've had a session with them, and then maybe a week or so later they're coming back and you're asking them, okay, well, how did things go? And what did you work on such and such? And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, well, I still don't understand. I don't get it. And it's all negative. And, you're thinking to yourself, Lord, I think we need to redo that session over again because it's almost like it was for naught, and that's something that, somebody such as yourself that specializes in that area of the game really has their work cut out for them because it's I'm sure you could tell 1,000 stories of situations like that. But Greg, let's also I want to talk about, since we're talking about amateur players here and high handicappers, something else that you talk about in the book is, of course, the first tee jitters. We all at times have suffered with that, and some of us still do occasionally when we're playing. Even the better golfers have that occasionally, and sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. What are some things that people need to do to handle those first tee jitters?
Great question, Ted, and it's it's something that I can relate to directly. I used to have them really bad. I always I have 7 brothers and played a lot of sports growing up, and always had anxiety. I don't care if it was playing competitively or just playing recreationally, with friends in the neighborhood or with my brothers. I always had anxiety when it came time to when it was game time. And I mentioned the coach's corner. I had to overcome this major fear of public speaking in my life to get to where I am today. And that book wouldn't exist if it weren't for me overcoming my fear of public speaking. You and I wouldn't be talking today if I never overcame my fear of public speaking. So right. Much of the first tee jitters is how you perceive it. So let's not even think about the first tee as the first shot. Let's just think about it as your next shot, and let's take that energy, that we're all thinking is nervousness or fear. Let's take that energy and figure out how to make it work for us. So how your body, I talk about in the book, your body says go, but your mind says stop. So you're interpreting this energy that you're feeling, this anxiety, this tension, this nervousness, this shaking, this trembling as fear, but it's really just excitement. Your body is excited to get started, so you need to channel that energy and make it work for you. So to do that, you need to do exactly what we just talked about. Pick that dime spot of where the ball is going to land, visualize the flight path of the ball, and have all of your energy focused on it. Now, this sounds really, really simple, okay? I understand that. However, It takes weeks and months and years of conditioning, depending on the individual, to get to the point where they don't have this. And that feeling, it's a good thing. So to have that energy is positive. You just need to redirect it to make it work for you. But that nervousness or that anxiety might always still be there, but there's a big difference between trying to hit it with your hand shaking or trying to hit it focused with that energy focused on your target. Totally different experience. And
that's really where
it sounds easy. It takes practice and time and conditioning to overcome it.
Right, and that's really where the difference lies between the professionals and the amateurs. The amateurs, obviously, they're there with their hands trembling and they're shaking, knees knocking, and I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration for some, but not for all. I've seen some, some players on the first tee, at local courses, and you can tell that they're very, very nervous. And understandably so. They're not used to, especially when you've got 2 or 3 groups coming up behind on the first tee and everybody's backed up. And that'll do it for sure. Whereas the pros, you never, even though they have some nervous energy, it's different. They're able to channel it and focus it, as you said, into an area that is going to benefit them. And that's why, when you watch, and I'm sure that there's, certainly this weekend here in the Masters tournament, I think everybody, I don't care how seasoned of a pro or veteran they are, everybody's a little nervous at the Masters because it's such a big tournament. But the pros seem to, when you're watching them on TV or if you have the pleasure of seeing them live at a PGA Tour event, they don't appear nervous at all. But inside, obviously, there's I'm sure some butterflies still stirring around. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I said that it's definitely happening. You just don't see it as much.
Exactly. And if you ask most of the tour players, I'm sure they would tell you that, and I know they've interviewed someone on the Golf Channel over the years, and they've asked them that, and, they all pretty much said the same thing. In fact, I'm not sure if it was Tiger, but one of them actually said, the day that I go up and don't get nervous is the day I'm going to give up golf because that excitement and momentum is lost. So, and that's a good point as well. That nervous energy is good, but it needs to be channeled properly, which sort of leads into the next, playing under pressure. What are some things that we can help the average golfer out there? Obviously, we don't need to do anything for the pros, but the average golfer, especially the really high handicappers, maybe 25 and up, that are new to the game and that sort of thing, how can we help them play better under pressure?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to answer this one. I'll try and be as direct as I possibly can. I think that the biggest part of it, Ted, is you have to embrace it. you have to want to be in that situation where, you know, you're the guy or you're the girl to come up and hit this shot in the quote-unquote pressure situation. You have to really embrace and you have to want to be in that situation, number one, as opposed to facing it from a fear-based perspective. I have a gentleman who I'm coaching that's playing in the U.S. Open qualifier coming up on May 5th, and after his first coaching session with me, he said, Greg, he goes, I've already gone from a fear-based approach to this qualifier to what do I need to do to be 100% ready for this event. That's after a 1-hour coaching session. So I'm not saying that it's always that easy. You know, he certainly gravitated towards it pretty quickly, but the bottom line is that you have to want to be in that situation. And then number two, you have to, you know, we all think that when we're in a situation, it's life and death. And, you know, depending on how old you are, 50, 100 years from now, we're all going to be gone. So is that situation that was quote-unquote life or death at the time, did it really even matter? And you know what? If you didn't perform in it this time, that's okay, because you're going to get another chance or another chance. We put too much emphasis on a shot or a round of golf or an opponent or a specific match when, going back to what we talked about in Coach's Corner, you need to make every practice session your most important practice session, and you need to make every match your most important match. Now, I'm not saying that you're not going to feel it, you know, the nervousness or that competition anxiety when you go playing it just with that simple mindset. But this is where, you know, having a strategy every time you practice and every time you play makes such a big difference, because that strategy keeps you grounded and it keeps you calm and it keeps you focused and confident. So if your strategy when you're playing in a competitive event, when you might have a tendency to focus on your competition, is hit my target, well, you're going to be less likely to think about your opponent if you're constantly thinking, hit my target, hit my target, hit my target, because now all of your energy is focused on what it's supposed to be as opposed to something else.
Right. And so many people, you know, as I tried to, you know, sort of allude to earlier in the program during the Coach's Corner part of it, you know, there's so many people out there that all they seem to focus, you know, want to focus their efforts on hitting the ball better and making better golf shots. And, you know, obviously we all want to be able to do that because that gives confidence. But at the same time, there is such a big area, you know, as was pointed out earlier, is the emotional side of golf. That again, at a higher level, of course, that's something that has been pushed in the forefront for the last probably the decade or so. But having said that, on an amateur level or your weekend golfers, they don't see themselves as needing to have that looked at as well. And I think that's so important that there's just so much information out there available now through instruction on the emotional side of golf, if you will. And I'm not going to use that mental side again. I caught myself there. I was so tempted to say it, but you know,
that's pretty
because
impressive.
you know, let's be honest,
that.
We're probably in the same age group, of course, but you know, for so long that's what we were taught to say, and you know, it was the physical side, the mental side of the game. So it's kind of hard to break old habits, but you know, the emotional side is something that people don't really factor in. And as you put in earlier in the program too, you talked about things outside of the round of golf that can impact how you play for that day. So what are some things, and I don't want to give away too much of your book because I want people to, and we're going to talk about that in a second about how people can get a hold of a copy of that, but I don't want to give away too much of it. I want people to be able to go and read it for themselves. But what are some things that people can do, you know, to really help with the emotional side of their golf game?
Awesome question. And it's a loaded one for sure. But, you know, again, going back to what I talked about in Coach's Corner, so much of you getting better on the course is predicated on you becoming better off of the golf course. And, you know, since 90% of our thought process is negative and it's occurring automatically or unconsciously, well, you know, we need to become adept at eliminating these ants or these automatic negative thoughts. So what I teach is a very simple 3-step solution to do so. And number one, the first step is you have to identify when you actually have negative energy. Okay, so let's say, for example, on the golf course, first tee jitters, perfect example, right? I know I have negative energy. My hands are shaking, my heart's racing, and I can actually feel sweat on my brow, okay? I have negative energy. It's tangible. So that's the first step, is you have to identify it. The second step is to physically stop moving, to stop your thought process. So when you because we're constantly in motion, constantly. Even when we're sitting, we're moving. So when you physically stop moving, Ted, it changes your whole physiology, okay? So that's the second step, and I call it, stop and blow the whistle. That's what the head coach does, is you blow the whistle. When you hear a head coach blow the whistle during practice, everybody stops, right? So step 2 is to stop and blow the whistle, and then the step 3, to focus on what you want. So that's why you have to have a strategy when you play golf. So if your strategy for today is hit my target, that's what I'm going to focus on. I feel this nervousness, this tension, this shaking, this trembling. I'm going to physically stop moving, and I'm going to focus on my target. Hit my target, and you keep saying it. You just keep saying hit my target, and you flush out that negative energy to the point where you feel a little more calm and relaxed. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to physically eliminate it for sure, 100%, but this is what you need to do both on and off the golf course. You need to become adept at reversing this negative energy 24/7. That way it makes it so much easier to do it when you're in those pressure situations or you're experiencing first tee jitters on the course.
Right, and what sort of comes to mind for me is we've often heard people say the power of positive thinking, and there's really a lot of truth to that, because let's take it out of golf for a second here. On a job interview, if you are telling yourself in your mind, there's 1,500 applicants for this job, right from the get-go, that you're going up such a mountain of people against a mountain of people. If you go in with a negative mindset, you're not going to project a positive image to the person that's sitting across from you doing the interview. And you need to go in there with, much like you would with a practice session in golf, is you need to go in there with a sense of purpose. You want to put your best foot forward. You want to, articulate why you're the right person for that position. And you want to be able to reinforce in your own mind with some positive imagery and some positive thoughts going into that interview. And it's the same thing, obviously, in the golf course. And a lot of people set themselves up for failure. So the power of positive thinking has proven time and time again that it works. And, that's really kind of what you're talking about here, is instead of, replaying and playing these negative thoughts in our mind all the time just because we've had a bad shot or a bad round, we need to start thinking, or rather rethinking, in a more positive light in order to change that, in order to erase. So in other words, if I've got a negative thought, we might have to have 2 or 3 positive thoughts to override that negative thought. Am I going on the right path here?
Oh my God, Ted, you're hitting the nail on the head, and you're singing my song, because it's the core of what I teach, and it's so vitally, negative thinking is the root of all evil, period. Everybody says, oh, money's the root of all evil. Money's a resource. Money's a tool. There's nothing negative about money except how people associate with it. A $20 bill is a $20 bill. There's nothing negative about it. But how we associate money in our minds with certain things is why we say it's the root of all evil, because we associate it with greed and jealousy and all this other stuff. However, the root of all evil is negative thinking, right?
Yeah.
What starts wars? What starts crime? What creates problems at home? What creates problems at school? Why does a kid go off and stab 20-some-odd people? Because they have these negative thoughts that are just running rampant in their mind, and they have not only no clue how to stop it, they don't even know how to stop it. So once you actually identify the fact that, okay, wow, I didn't realize that 90% of our thought process was negative and it's occurring unconsciously or automatically, that's pretty staggering. The first time I heard that, I thought, man, I feel sorry for those chumps. And then about 3 or 4 nights later, it's 3 in the morning, I'm lying awake, stressed out about something that's that's from the day, and I'm thinking I'm just like everybody else. So
been there, done that.
Yeah, even for people that think they're positive people, there's still a lot of this tape that's just going in the background that's working against us. And if you don't learn how to, like you said, replace those negative thoughts or those ants with positive imagery or positive focus or positive intention in golf, you're done. You're done. Yeah. You have I talk to tour pros. I coach tour pros and touring professionals. I'm not working with anybody on the PGA or LPGA tour yet, but I work with touring professionals, and I listen to how some of these guys talk, and I flat out tell them, I said, you don't have a chance. If you're talking the way you're talking, you have no chance because you're going up against the best of the best. And if you think that for 1 second you're even going to make it to the big dance with the way you're communicating, you're wrong. But then if you think you're actually going to get somewhere when you make it to the tour with how you're communicating, you're clueless. You're clueless. Communication is king.
Yeah, and that's so true. And as we've sort of talked about throughout this program, if you step up to that next shot with your head full of negative thoughts and assume that you're going to hit a bad shot before you even address the ball, the game's already over. You've already lost. And, because you've already set yourself up for failure. And that's what most people, unfortunately, do. They're replaying, as we've said several times, they're replaying that negative loop in their mind. They don't know how to shut it off. And this is why it's so important to not just, it's great, and some people say, well, I only play, once or twice a week. Why do I need to have I don't need to go and see a shrink to, or somebody to tell me how to, I just want to hit the ball better. So how do I hit the ball better? Well, this is one of the ways that you hit the ball better, is by understanding your thought process. This is what the pros do. People say, well, I want to play better golf. I want to be a better golfer. Help me do that. Well, this is one of the ways that you get help to do that is by addressing an area of golf that really has not been addressed until maybe the last 10 years in the everyday field. It's been on the pros for a long time. Jack Nicklaus doesn't talk about how he hit the best shots ever. He talks about the mental side, and I should have caught myself. I apologize. But
it's okay.
That's what he talked about in his book and in his videos was how he prepared mentally for his rounds, not how he was, going to hit the golf shot.
Yeah, and a quick side note on Nicklaus. I remember listening to him. It was probably 2 years ago when he was in the booth. It was probably during his tournament. He talked about how he didn't win a lot of the tournaments that he won. He would just let the guy lose. Yeah. Which I thought was very interesting because he would basically, he goes, I would just pretty much let them self-destruct. And that's the reason that he was so successful is because he was intimidating. So what came first, the intimidation or the success? But it's like Tiger. Everybody was so intimidated to play Tiger on Sunday because he had that persona or that perception or that domination of the game that people would get so caught up in the fact that they were playing Tiger. And, of course, the media would ask the players a million questions going into Sunday. And what happened? Most of them would crumble.
Yep.
But they were so focused on all of the wrong things. That's why. Sure, Tiger was playing great golf and Jack was playing great golf, but these other guys were self-destructing.
Yeah, and that's a valid point, too, because I remember when Tiger first came out on the tour and, some of the players that got questioned, I'm not going to certainly name any of them, but I can remember a few of them particularly that were very vocal about, it was sort of like, Wright, here's this kid coming up here and, saying hello world and doing this big press conference. And really, I'm sure a lot of them thought it was a joke, but I'll tell you, within about a year or so after Tiger coming out, they weren't singing that same tune. And what ultimately happened
nobody was laughing at him.
No, and ultimately for quite some time, as he was dominating many of the tournaments, there was really it was almost like I would say an impenetrable ceiling of glass that they couldn't break through. And finally, I remember, and I think it was Hal Sutton that made a comment on one of the tournaments that he finally saw that Tiger could be beat. And once that happened, once people realized that, he wasn't perfect, that they could beat him, then, as time went on, the players started to get more comfortable, and as more people surpassed Tiger, but he did have, and that's why Nicklaus was the same way. Nicklaus knew, he literally by looking at the player and watching the player crumble on a few holes, he knew what was going to happen, so he just continued playing his game and didn't, worry about, well, I got to make 6 more birdies or I got to do this to win. He just knew if he kept playing his game that, player B over here was going to fall by the wayside and the tournament was his.
Yep.
And that's Greg. We've just got literally a few minutes here left, and I want to give you an opportunity. I want to something that you had put in your notes, and I wanted to ask you this as a final question, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can get your book and how they can get a hold of you. But one of the things that you wanted to talk about was you have a pretty good lofty goal, but it's certainly an attainable goal. You want to be one of the most sought-after golf coaches in the world. Why do you want to do that? What's your thought process there?
It's a great, awesome question, Ted. And it's not one of it's the most sought-after golf coach in the world. And, it's not about, it has nothing to do with Greg Liberto. I know it sounds like a very arrogant, egotistical statement, but it's really not about me. It's about me taking the time to identify what I wanted. So in Coach's Corner, one of the last questions that was asked was, I'm a 60-year-old guy getting back into this game after some years off, hip surgery, blah, blah, blah. What do you recommend to get started? And the question, I responded by saying is you have to identify what you want from the game. And when I last October identified what I wanted for myself with what I was doing, what I envisioned was, and my website isn't there yet, but I know where it's going, and it's going through more changes as we speak, but I envisioned more people coming to my website for advice or tips on how to improve their game than any other golf website in the world. And when I realized that and I had that vision, Ted, it was almost like, sheep flocking to the herd. It was like I had this real life vision of, it's hard to visualize people clicking on your website, but it was like arrows just pointing to my website from golfers all around the world because I had all this very unique and refreshing and new way of thinking about the game. And I don't talk about getting in the zone. I talk about being 100% ready. I don't talk about performing under pressure. I talk about crushing your ants. So my thought is that I want to have more people coming to my website than any other golf website in the world by October 23rd of 2015. As a result, I am going to become the most sought-after golf coach in the world.
Right, and also, and that's a fantastic way to put it. The other thing too is, in addition to having golfers, want to visit your site and see what's available. It's also, I'm sure other teaching professionals, other coaches that are out there, you want to be able to draw them as well and give them a valuable resource. Because one of the things that, as I was mentioning earlier in the program, the reason I'm doing this program, Golf Talk Live, is I want to take a lot of these great teachers and coaches and so forth that I've sort of come across over the last few years through different social media and networking and so forth. And I want to bring them to a forum, if you will, and allow them to talk and share their ideas, because it's equally as important for us to exchange ideas and information as it is for us to share it with the general public out there and learning and teaching them how to help in their game. It's important that we help one another, because one of the things that's going to keep golf growing and keep it going is that we need to all be able to share our knowledge and our expertise, and not just sort of, there's a lot of websites, as I'm sure you know, out there, and there's a lot of great professionals and teaching pros all around the world, not just here in the United States. And there's so much information that everybody, needs to sort of go here and go there, and it can be very confusing at times. And one of the things that I want to do with my program is to draw all of these great people from all over the world together, much like you're doing with your site, and allow these great teaching professionals together and share and expand this game, and then in turn let the general public that wants to learn have a place to go. And that's essentially what my goal is with this program, is to bring all of that talent together and share it here on Golf Talk Live.
That's great. It's great. Love it.
Greg, sorry, go ahead.
I love it, Ted. I love what you're saying. I think it's awesome.
Well, to me, it's not, and I understood. What I knew exactly when you put that there, that it wasn't a matter of arrogance or an ego boost or things like that. I understand the purpose, and that's essentially what I'm trying to do with this program here, by bringing a lot of the professionals together. And now I've expanded, of course, with the ladies program, Women of Golf, and I want to open that market here as well, because it's not happening out there anywhere else. I mean, there's lots of media outlets and things that are doing things, but they're talking about the tour players, and that's why I don't do a lot of that on this program. I'm not here to talk about what Tiger did last week and so on, because people go to the Golf Channel or go to ESPN Golf to get that information. So I want to bring them here, and this is essentially what you're trying to do in your area of expertise, is to try and not only make it available for the average person out there that wants their golf game, but also you want to be able to let other teaching professionals and coaches out there learn from your expertise and experience. So, Greg, in closing, since we got a few moments here, let the listeners know how they can get a hold of you and where they can get a copy of your book.
Sure. Yeah. The best way to get a hold of me is directly via email, which is Greg, Greg, at theheadcoach.us. That's Greg at theheadcoach.us. And, if anybody's interested in working directly with me, I have an individual coaching program, but I've also put together a series of seminars. So if somebody wants to have me come out to their club to deliver a group program, I have that option as well. And then to order a copy of the book, it's on Amazon, and it's a really long link, so I could never possibly give that one out. But if you just Google 18 holes, if you just type in 18 holes on Amazon and then my name, Greg Liberto, it's Liberto, it'll come up right away.
And your website, Greg?
It's theheadcoach.us.
Excellent. Greg, I want to thank you for coming on, not only for your interview, but also participating in Coach's Corner. I appreciate you stepping up and sharing your thoughts and insight with the listeners here. And I know that what you're offering here is something of great value, not only to the average golfer out there, but also to those of us in the industry. And I'm glad that you were able to come and share that knowledge. And you have an open invitation to come back at any time if you want to share some other information on what you're doing, or if you want to participate in more Coach's Corner segments. We'd certainly love to have your thoughts and input and share that with the listening audience. And I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. That was excellent. You're a great host, and it's fun actually doing these back to back. I learned a lot, from both Clint and Mike, and being on Coach's Corner. You're very good at what you do. The show is excellent, and I would love an opportunity to come back.
Well, you as all of them, you have an open invitation, Greg, and we'll certainly talk more. And I want to wish you much continued success, and I have nothing but 100% confidence that you will reach that goal in 2015. And let me just say this from somebody who's made comment of this a number of times on the program tonight about having to overcome a fear of yours. Obviously, you were able to reprogram yourself with positive imagery and positive thoughts, and able to and allowed you to overcome something that I've actually had myself at a much younger age. And had to do that myself. So I always had difficulty with public speaking, and I can remember going back into the classroom some years ago in school, and I was always one of the nervous ones at the front of the class. So I know exactly where you're coming from, and obviously when people tune into this program now, they might scratch their head and say, well, you don't sound like it, but a lot can happen in 50 years. So Greg, I certainly understand and appreciate where you're coming from. And know exactly. It takes a long time, but I'll tell you, it's great therapy. But Greg, thank you very, very much for coming on Golf Talk Live. And as I said, you're welcome to come back anytime on the program. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and views with my audience tonight.
Thanks, Ted.
All right. You have a great evening and enjoy the Masters this weekend.
You do the same.
All right. Take care. All right. Okay, just to wind up, we actually ran past a little bit of time, but not a problem. I enjoyed my guest tonight. I just want to thank very quickly here, as I just got literally a minute or two left, and then we'll be going off. I just want to thank my guest panel tonight, of course, returning favorite, Mr. Clint Wright, PGA teacher professional and a 30-year member of the PGA at R3 Golf Academy over in Pendleton, South Carolina. And if you want to get more information, you can visit their site at www.tgmgolf.com. Of course, Mike Lawrence also joining us, a newcomer to the program, and I want to thank Mike Lawrence, another PGA professional and a life member of the PGA, and also a designer of Solid Contact Golf, the R3 approach, anatomy of playing and improving at the game of golf. And we're going to get Mike, Clint, and the other partners on one night for a show and let them talk a little bit more about the R3 approach. We'll get them on the program. So, Clint, if you're still listening to the program, I'm going to reach out to you the next little while, and we'll get that set up. But I want to thank you. And, of course, I want to thank my very special guest this evening, the head coach himself, Greg Liberto. Great guy. Make sure that you visit Amazon.com and type in 18 holes and also Greg Liberto, Liberto, and get a copy of his book. Great man to have on the program. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. And if you want to learn or want to get a hold of Greg, you can do so through his website at www.theheadcoach.us. I want to thank all of my listeners, as always, for tuning in each and every week here on Golf Talk Live. And don't forget to come back here next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time on blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live. And don't forget, on Tuesday coming up next week, on April the 15th, I'll have my second show with my very special co-host, LPGA professional Cindy Miller. Will be back on the Women of Golf show, the new show that we launched last week. And if you didn't get a chance to get that, just type in do your search, if you will, at blogtalkradio.com/the Women of Golf. And if you missed last week's interview, I had a great guest to start off. Cindy, I had a great guest to start off the show, the legendary Kathy Whitworth. You want to go and check that out. It was a great interview. She's a very humble lady and a true champion to the game. Make sure you check that out. And we're going to have some great guests coming up on that show. That's Tuesday mornings through the Golf Talk Live network, but it's on blogtalkradio.com/Women of Golf. You make sure you put in Women of Golf, not Golf Talk Live on that one, and you'll go directly to that homepage as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Special thank you as well to all the listeners worldwide, and also thank you to all the people that support this program. Mr. Jonathan Laird, thank you all the time from South Coast Golf Guide, and, of course, Meredith Kirk Golf, and, of course, the Endless Golf, Myrtle Beach Golf Magazine, Nikki and Tiffany Litherland for help spreading the word all the time, and, of course, Mr. Bernie Pinder of Ontic Golf, and, of course, my good buddy from over in Ireland, Mr. Peter Doyle of Doyle Golf Solutions. Thanks. I want to thank my panel one last time, Clint Wright, Greg Liberto, the head coach, and, of course, Mike Lawrence for being part of the Coach's Corner panel tonight. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you stopping by Golf Talk Live. Have a great week, everybody. Enjoy the Masters, and I will see you here next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody, and have a great weekend.